This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And I am trying to get this to go, but I don't think it's gone where I want it to go. Welcome to the phone. You know, it's always so much fun.
Yep, got that right.
It is. So, okay, we've got the link. We'll try it that way. Maybe that'll work. Who knows?
Well, we found that out over at Polk College. They must have put a steel roof on there or something, because my Wi-Fi that works all over the state and in Alabama and Georgia did not function in Polk County.
I believe that.
Yeah, but I did the game on a cell phone. Yeah, it was all right. I mean, you know, it just that stuff like that happens.
Yes, it does.
Welcome to New Age Electronics, U.S. style.
You know, yeah, it's well, that's a perfect segue into what I was going to talk about today, and that is alternative science, for lack of a better word. And I seem to have been running into a rash of it lately, and I confess that it's a bit so what is alternative science? It's thinking that things like the coffee that comes out of the fridge gives off cold energy. It does not give off cold energy. When you stand next to a window with snow on the other side of it, it's not giving off cold energy. It's sucking the warmth out of you. That's why you feel cold. And yes, the air is different temperatures in layers as it comes closer and closer to the window pane, which has been sucking the heat out into the colder area. Things always go from hot to cold. It's entropy. Your energy wears down. It doesn't increase. It wears down over time. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I would call a pseudoscience, right? It feels like you feel the cold coming in, but the reality is what you feel, what your nerves are sensing, is the BTUs, the British thermal units, which is commonly used to measure heat energy, is leaving your body. So, yeah, you're feeling the loss is what you're feeling. You're not feeling an increase of cold energy, right? Think about it for a minute, folks. Lizards and other cold-blooded animals don't get more energetic as they get cold. They get less energetic, so they're losing energy. That's why they slow down.
Huh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, I guess, yeah. You're the scientist, I mean.
Well, you know, and that's something most people don't expect. They don't expect a rabbi with an engineering degree. And, you know, the standard joke in my family was that I went from mechanical engineering to theological engineering.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So when people, you know, I'm still an engineer. I'm just a theological engineer.
Oh, yeah, that is so cool.
You like that?
Yeah, I do.
And, you know, there's some really funny examples of that through time. I can remember being up on the bima leading a service, and the president of the congregation comes up, and it's Hanukkah, and we've got the Hanukkah lights up, and he's talking about how it's his job to make sure that the building is physically safe and this and that. And he's not wrong, but I'm looking at the Hanukkah candles that we've just lit, and they're directly underneath a heat sensor for the sprinkler system. And, you know, and he's rambling on, which, you know, that's certainly his right. And I just kind of like walked over and moved the Hanukkah candles so that we didn't get drenched in water.
Well, you just would have had a ceremony in the rain, that's all.
An indoor rain.
With the fire department showing up
Now,
outside.
Interestingly, that actually something like that happened when a computer was installed at one of Goodyear's facilities. They put the computer underneath a heat sensor.
Oh, no.
Oh, it gets even better.
And of course, those are the days when computers
Those were the days when
massive.
computers were vast heat machines.
Oh.
And, there was a lot of energy with the tubes and all of the old technology. And it gets worse, right? The sensor trips off, says there's a fire, starts to douse the computer. The computer immediately shuts off all services to that unit that's on fire, worsening everything and shutting itself down. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it was not a pretty scene. So thinking about these little things that don't seem important at the time, in fact, are. So it looks like we have somebody.
Mm-hmm.
We do have somebody. Thank you for calling in to Ask a Rabbi. And for those who want to join later, it's 772-340-1590. So who do I have? Jerry. Hi, Jerry, on line 1.
Good morning, Rabbi. I just found out last week about Esther and the Book of Esther, and she existed B.C., before Christ. And how I found out, I don't really know much about it. Excuse me. But my question to Mike was the correspondence between Paul was incarcerated and his letters to Timothy. And always kind of an innocent question. I just wondered if those letters were put under glass, and I wonder about who Esther was, and he just touched on it, and that she was B.C. before Christ, and something called the Book of Esther.
Right.
I'd like to listen off her.
So Jerry's... okay, yeah, so let me repeat your question, because not everybody hears
Esther,
your call.
The Book of Esther.
You're asking about the Book of Esther.
And she was B.C. She was before Christ.
Well, not most. All of Jewish scripture is before Jesus. So, so it's
okay. I'd like
there's
to
a lot of history that went on before Jesus comes on the scene. An awful lot. All of Jewish scripture, and Esther is one of the last couple books in in Jewish scriptures. So, Jerry is asking about the Book of Esther, and I'll be glad to talk about Esther. Her holiday is actually in spring. Jews celebrate it. It's called Purim because the bad guy Haman in the story chooses lots, and the word for lot is pur. So if you cast lots, it's pur. Purim is lots, and so it's a celebration of, I guess we could say, the victory of spirit over trusting in astrology or in lots and luck. So that's part of the story. But it's a crazy book, Jerry. It is a very crazy book. So are you going to be listening offline then?
Yes, he is, yeah.
Okay, and I thought it went silent there. So Jerry is listening offline. It's interesting. There is a connection between Purim and Hanukkah. They're both... Now, Purim, of course, is scriptural because it is in the Book of Esther. And Esther says on the 14th of Adar 2, everybody should celebrate it. Most years don't have an Adar 2, so we celebrate it on Adar when there's only one. But we do celebrate it on Adar 2 when it's a leap year, which is like 7 out of 17 years or something like that. It's a strange schedule, and it's based on making sure that holidays like Hanukkah don't start on a Tuesday. That actually is not one of the intents, but it's one of the byproducts. And that's so that, for example, Passover doesn't start on a Thursday, which would be impossible, because you can't get ready for Shabbat as a second day of a holiday. It just doesn't work. It can be the first day, it can be the day before the holiday, but it can't be the day after the holiday starts, because you can't get ready for Shabbat properly if you're doing a festival before.
Of course, I remember you years ago talking about Esther, kind of a fun girl.
Esther's
I guess,
Esther's a wild. She's a
wild child,
wild chick. Yeah, she is, and it's a really interesting book, and it's part of. There's a set of 5 stories, and that's one of them. 5 pieces of literature that are not considered anything other than literature. They're not considered history. They're not considered prophecy. They're considered literature. That's one. The Book of Ruth is another such book. And those are Megillot. Megillah, gorilla, is named for the Megillot. It's the whole Megillah means the whole scroll, the whole story.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a Yiddishism or a Hebrewism that has crept in. The whole Megillah. Megillah is a scroll, as opposed to a Sefer, like a Torah, which is a book. So there's a difference in the level. And, I always tell my students, imagine if you had to carry a bunch of scrolls to study from, and you had to unroll the whole scroll to find that little reference about, this or that was on the test. Books are a really good technological innovation when they came out, and they were called Biblos, which is why the Bible is the book. And it's why Muslims talk about the children of the book. It comes from the town of Byblos, where they developed the technology of taking leaves of paper and sewing them. But I digress from Esther. So Esther is a wild lady. She is Mordecai's niece/adopted daughter because she's an orphan. Her parents have been killed, and so Mordecai is raising her. He doesn't appear to have a wife in the story, but he's taking care of Esther. And the king, it's really poking fun at some kings in the area. It's set in Persia. Persia, of course, is Iran. And so that's going on. And my guess is, here we go again, that then the folks are Zoroastrian in Persia. But you can't really tell that from the story of Esther. It's not clear. In fact, he's not a model of Zoroastrianism. He's, in fact, a laughing buffoon, to put it mildly. And people say it's Xerxes. I'm not sure. I'm not sure Xerxes could have been that bad. Because he's having a 6-month drinking party.
Oh, wait a minute. What's the address?
Yeah, gotcha. and during this, he asks his then queen, Vashti, to show up, and she says, no, not going to do that. And some people will say that he asks her to appear nude, wearing only her crown. The text is not clear. She is summoned by the eunuchs, one of the genders in the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther has 5 genders in it, folks. You have to read it carefully to see that, but gender
Gender
fluidity is not new.
5
genders in the Book of Esther. You have to read it carefully, but you'll find them. You'll find the men who wear dresses and the other way around. And,
okay.
There's a reason for eunuchs. It's much more involved than just somebody who's going to serve the king. So you've got to dig a little deeper. You've got to look at some of the sociology of what was going on at the time to understand some of the story.
And you thought Playboy was new?
No, Playboy was not new. It's been around. So anyway, the queen refuses to come. I don't blame her. I wouldn't want to go into a room full of men who'd been drinking for 6 months. Certainly not a single woman alone. I'm not sure there are enough guards in that scenario.
Well, after 6 months, they probably all passed out.
Well, I'm sure some of them were routinely passed out, but yeah. And of course, nobody's collecting taxes because everybody's drinking, so the kingdom is poor. There's a whole lot of little side stuff that if you read the story carefully, starts to make sense, right? So Haman's deal of paying the king with the silver has to do with the king being able to meet his bills. And, you undercover some of these things in the story, and they become quite interesting. But the sexual innuendo in the book is so strong that, of course, we have to kidify it to make it a palatable holiday for the kids. It's an interesting book. And I can remember chuckling about it. I had a woman once come up to me at a gathering. It was not a Jewish gathering. It was mixed, all different people. And comes up to me and says, well, isn't Esther the epitome of what a bride should be? And I'm like, no. She's not, and certainly her husband is not. Beauty and the Beast notwithstanding.
Oh, man.
She's recognized as a beauty. She's one who takes the advice of one of the castrated men on how to please a man. So it's kind of an interesting... it gets interesting. It's a very interesting book. And
so I take it when a kid gets bar mitzvahed, they don't learn that book?
They don't usually learn about... No, that book is a holiday. You don't usually do... Well, and Jewishly, so there is a thing that says you don't compound joys. You don't put a bar or bat mitzvah over a holiday because the holiday is its own rejoicing. And it wouldn't, if you did it close, you could probably do a theme on it, but I wouldn't. It's dress up, it's upside down day, it's silliness, it's craziness. In Israel, they bop you on the car and on your head with little hammers that make noise. There's noisemakers all over. It's carnival in a Jewish setting.
Wow. Okay.
It's pretty wild. And it is all about all of the. There's a line in there saying that the king invited all of his ministers, both big and small, and you can use your imagination. It doesn't say great and lesser. It says big and small. And I do not think that's an accident, given the rest of the tenor of the book. But we try to conduct it very seriously. It is a mitzvah to hear the entire book read in both Hebrew and your language, whatever language you understand, on the eve of Purim. All Jewish holidays, of course, start the evening before and move forward. So yeah, but what it shares with Hanukkah is this strange little blessing of thank you, God, for the struggles and the war and the strife in our life. And that's kind of a strange prayer. It took me a long time. Why do we thank God for wars? Because that doesn't sit really well with my not wanting war.
Yeah.
Right? But I think when I really think about it for a while, what I get out of that is that we do need a certain amount of strife in our life. Because if everything is perfect, then everything becomes strife. Then the hangnail becomes a catastrophe. And real strife helps keep us a little more in perspective. Helps us recognize what really is important and valuable in our lives. Too much privilege, too much anything kind of tampons down the waves that we can understand. The heights of happiness, the heights of good fortune. And if you don't have bad fortune, you have nothing to compare it to. So there's a need for that negativity. But the other thing is, thank you for the war. Thank you for the recognition that this isn't something that can be solved easily, and that given the technology and the development of people at the time, war had to be the answer. And so there are times when certain levels of aggression, right? If somebody's coming at you with a gun, shooting you, it's not inappropriate to shoot them back. Well, assuming that the person coming at you is not a federal agent or a police officer, but in fact just somebody intent on harming you, right? It is okay to defend yourself. So self-defense is a valid justification. It's not considered murder, unless you, of course, set up the scene. Then things get dicey. And even Scripture recognizes...
You have been watching NCIS.
I have been watching NCIS. I have binge-watched all the way up to the current episode, so...
wow!
Yeah.
I can't believe you.
It only took me a year.
Yeah, well, they've been on 18 years. So.
Yeah. So,
wow.
It's been a while, and now I'm without a current episode, at least until they come up with the next one. I'm sure it'll be out soon.
Yeah, COVID has done a real number on Hollywood. Yeah, a lot of the new spring seasons, if you will, are not even going to be coming out until the end of January, if you will. Yeah,
it's COVID has just discombobulated for right. Everything is upended. It's different. It's weird, and now we've got Omicron, and what's it going to be like? Because it has more breakthrough into vaccinated folks than previous mutations have, and it's going to be an interesting. Going to be a time.
Yeah. And, we're feeling it in athletics, and by the time we get back for the guys, which is 2 weeks, the old face shield may be back on again. I don't know.
We may see all of the restrictions coming back.
Yep. And testing.
And
Which, we were regularly tested last year, so.
yeah. And I think that testing and temperature measuring and all of those things are reasonable. What fascinates me perhaps the most in some of the recent things is that flu went down this year. Why did flu go down? Because of the safety measures associated with COVID prevention, with COVID fighting. Right? So there's a thank you for the battle where, it's a tough one in any scenario, and it of course falls apart when it's your loved one.
I think next year maybe I see
Or a year or two.
a mixed flu / COVID shot every year.
Well, certainly this year is a year for getting both.
Well, yeah, and some
Right.
of us older folks have gotten the boosters as well.
And and I think that okay, so for the older middle-aged folks, it was I was reading a study this week that said that 50% of people aged 60 to 85 now view themselves as middle-aged.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
This ancient body doesn't think so.
Well, do you really feel old?
Do I feel old?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are times where I really feel
when the
old.
alarm goes off in the morning, I definitely why am I doing this?
That's
Early
true.
retirement sounds good. She said as she works and you work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but life is going on longer, and we are doing a better job. And I think that anybody over, I don't know what age they recommend starting it, but there's, of course, the flu shot, the pneumonia shot, and the COVID shot. And, I just had to be tested for TB, because the chaplains pass into the hospitals.
Oh.
Right? Because if you're going to be a chaplain in the hospital, it's helpful if you don't bring TB into it.
I thought that was gone a long time ago.
It's mostly gone in the U.S. It's not so mostly gone in other parts of the world.
Oh, great.
That
was horrible.
In America, but tuberculosis, TB testing is ongoing, and it's mandated and it's required. So why not COVID, folks? It's just another disease. And COVID's a weird thing. People do not understand viruses. Viruses are very tiny bits of genetic material that attack your body or attack a body. And one of the reasons why they study bats so much is because bats can carry viruses and not get sick. So their system can handle the virus. Unfortunately, that means they shed it, because the big thing that the virus wants to do is to find other ways to reproduce itself. And so those are asymptomatic, but they have the virus, and it becomes a little bit dicey how to figure out which bats have it, which ones don't. That's an awful lot of testing. We cannot afford to get rid of bats, because without bats we won't have fruit, folks. Some of the fruit trees are only pollinated by bats.
I've never heard that.
And the amount of insects they eat is huge. They have voracious appetites of things we don't like mosquitoes, all of Zika virus, right? Think of these things, folks, and that's a bloodborne virus given to you when a mosquito bites somebody who has it, the mosquito gets it, and then they bite somebody else and share it. There are some things that are best not shared. So that's one method of transmission. The polio virus thank you Sabin and Salk for the amazing work they did in developing a vaccine that has brought polio to very low numbers. But the worst thing that has happened in science was the guy who faked the story, who faked the data and did an absolutely false report to achieve fame, claiming that there were negative things with vaccines. And we can probably thank a lot of the anti-vaxxers for believing that garbage when it's been clearly debunked. But it feeds into a fear, it feeds into a sense of identity, and that's why it's so hard to combat.
Well, you got a lot of the anti-vaxxers that are saying, well, you just don't know what's in this vaccine. And of course, my comeback is, have you ever eaten a hot dog? Because you don't know what's in that either.
Hot dog, stew, meatloaf, meatballs, hamburger.
Are you eating hamburger?
Vitamins, any medications. Do you really know what's in your insulin?
Whoa.
All of this is, and in food especially, food fraud is probably the biggest area for fraud, and I think that's part of the reason for the Jewish dietary laws is because people have food frauded for millennia. That's not a new trick. People have tried to slide things, I can remember my grandmother telling stories about butchers who, when supplies got short, would, bring things in through the back door. And I certainly saw some of that when I went shopping in some of the Asian countries. If they didn't have what you wanted, their back door was not into a storeroom, but into their neighbor's shop who might have had it. And the amount of trade that went back and forth behind the back door, fairly impressive.
That's
friendly competition.
Grab this chicken that's running outside. Yeah, well, that makes... I just think that if you look closely at some of, where your food limitations, if you will, it all made perfect sense without refrigeration.
Yeah. Yeah, we tend to think that the world, well, and today's kids coming up, students, right? Students never lived before 9/11, so they don't understand not having the security measures we have today. They don't understand not having a smartphone. They don't understand not having electricity. You give them a dial phone and they have no idea what to do with it. And those of us who are older and remember going, those of us who were a little bit on the sneaky side and knew how to go on the top, that technology is gone. And I've got an app on my phone that I show them how you dial. It's got a little dial phone. It'll actually dial a number and call it for you.
One of our players was we were on the bus watching a movie, going on the road, and they were in the movie they were using Morse code. He said, "What's that?"
Yeah.
I said, "Oh yeah, it's an entire code system." You sure?
Well,
dots and dashes.
And I know that you remember because I remember when you had to have Morse code qualification in order to be the license, the general manager for a radio station.
You bet. Yeah.
Because Morse code was the name of the
part
game.
Of the FCC test. Yeah. And you are going back to the caveman era.
I realized that, and it was an issue at my college radio station. Who was going to be the general manager because not everybody had an FCC license.
Sure.
With the code, and I can remember, learning it and sitting in class and tap. That was a great way to tap notes, because the teachers usually didn't.
The teachers didn't know. Oh, sure. Oh my.
Of course, that would have been my luck. I probably would have found one that did, but
former military attaché. Something.
That's true. A lot of the military comm officers certainly would have known.
Oh yeah.
Morse code.
Sure, well, yeah, they used it.
And there, I think there was an NCIS episode where somebody recognizes Morse code being tapped out on a ship.
Sure.
And it is used, right? SOS. That's why SOS was picked, because it's so obvious. It's an easy code. Da da da.
Dots and dashes.
There you go. He's put it. Yeah, Cliff is doing an SOS over there. So for those who remember Morse code, the first thing that I ever copied in Morse code was did it da 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 da. Did it da 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 da. So all the Morse coders can call in now.
Okay.
ID. Starts out with ID. Anyway.
McDonald's.
Not quite. It was not a nice thing that my friend tapped out to me. But she was a ham radio operator, and her Morse code was excellent.
Well, that's, hams.
Because hams used to do Morse code. Well,
they still do.
Yeah, some still do.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't see as many ham operator. But And it used to be mobile. That was the forerunner to CBs. And
Boy, you are going back.
I know. Radar detectors, when those things used to be out and worked. And now they don't use radar, they use light. So technology keeps moving. And the challenge with younger students, with younger people, they don't remember a time when that didn't exist. And I know that I've talked about it other times on the air. One of the things that really impacted me was when I went to Williamsburg and I saw them living a life before electricity. And then a lot of things started to make a lot more sense. And we have a lot of sayings from that period. Sleep tight comes from before we had bedboards, when the bottom, when your mattress sat on a bed frame that was tied with a rope. So sleep tight meant may your rope be tight so that your mattress doesn't sag in the middle and you wake up all crumpled.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so sleep tight means may the rope be tight, may your mattress
Yeah.
be firm.
Wow.
May you get a good night's sleep. And of course, don't let the bed bug bites is not,
Obvious.
yeah, that one's still around. It's helpful to not have bed bugs.
That's why you don't stay at the no-tell motel.
Yeah, you don't want to bring those guys home.
No. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in luggage and stuff.
Well, and all the different places you can pick it up as you travel. If your suitcase is next to somebody's suitcase on the air. Now I'm going to start a scare that way. But
Or an airport.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, or if you sit on a chair in a restaurant and somebody before you, they're not very big. They can hide very well. And don't think that just because you keep your house clean, you can't get them. Anybody can.
Ooh.
Yeah, for a while they were coming in on clothes and textiles because the people who worked on the clothes in some of those places that are not good for workers because they couldn't get rid of, they lived in places that were bed bug infested. So bed bugs are another interesting challenge. And getting rid of them in your homes if you get them is not easy. It's a good reason to have critters that eat those. So yeah, getting back to it, we want the bats. Our ecosystem depends on them. And I know for a long time I keep saying, why didn't Noah kill the mosquitoes? And the answer is that a lot of animals eat mosquitoes, and it is a source of great protein for the animals that eat them. How many of them get viruses that the mosquitoes are carrying? I don't know. We talked a little bit briefly about polio. There were some studies that linked polios to flies. That polio,
I never heard that.
if you read the literature carefully, it's not just transmitted from person to person, but by flies between people, which is probably why the superstition about going swimming came up. Because it used to be that mothers didn't let their kids go swimming in the summer for fear that they'd contract polio. And, of course, swimming is a great mix of people. There is close contact with others, but it also, flies like to come to places like that because there's usually food.
You bet. On the beach.
Yeah, food
Yep.
on the beach. And so you always have flies, great black flies. In Florida, we have love bugs, but another one of nature's questions of people bringing in things to do things that didn't quite work out. Florida is definitely a place where a lot of species and a lot of organisms have found home that might not otherwise have made it here.
My pet python.
Yeah, those little things.
Whoa.
Things that do well in Florida.
You look at some of those python hunting trips that they have. It's like, oh man, that's
Yeah.
Those things are awful.
Yeah. So.
And they just kill anything in their way.
Yeah, they will. They do. So, look at the pepper tree. That the Brazilian pepper tree. It's pretty. It's very, very pretty. I've taken some gorgeous pictures of the one in my yard before I killed it. Because I don't need it seeding the whole world. And you get one pepper tree, you'll have 17.
Yeah, and not native to here. So.
Yeah, they're not native to here. They don't have good predators. And, that's one of the things with when we mess with ecosystems, and we all do. We all do. You fall in love with a plant and you want it where you move to. and it's not native there, so you bring it with you. And I use the you generally, gently there, because, I looked at some things in the Caribbean, and oh man, I'd like to have that. But it really belongs in the Caribbean. It doesn't really necessarily belong here. It may or may not. The pepper tree was brought in because it is a beautiful, attractive, ornamental shrub that has just taken over the countryside. You can't go anywhere without seeing them. And I saw homes where people have them cultivated in their garden, and I'm like, do you realize that that's a pepper plant? You may not really want that here.
Wow. You mean that people actually messed with the environment before the Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, lots of people have messed with the environment. People messed with the environment on the Silk Road. Remember that Silk Road? That road is not a road and not silk, and some of it was over water. But, yeah, people messed with things all the time. That's how spaghetti gets to Italy. Thank you, Marco Polo. Bringing noodles back from China to Italy, and they become the national popular food. Of course, the Italians then take it and they make all kinds of pasta. So there's this local innovation. And then, of course, we continue to make new shapes of pasta, as creative as people could be. And you can now buy Jewish stars in pasta if you want. You can probably buy reindeer. I wouldn't be surprised. Who knows?
Well, and hats off to you.
To me?
We credited you on IRSC basketball. That you were the person who came up with the definition of myrmidons. They were in town last night. IRSC won. But
Congrats, IRSC.
And I said congrats to
she says that she's wearing
Rabbi Shafir
whoever she is,
Loeb,
yeah.
who came up with the definition of myrmidons.
Okay.
Cool.
So there's a rabbit hole I'm not going to go down.
Yeah, just a little Greek
Thank you.
mythology, that's all.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and lots of different things in the world. So pseudoscience. Cold energy is one of them. Somebody was telling me that water generates pressure in a bottle. That's why it's hard to open the cap. And it's like, no, they just don't want the contents leaking out. So they put them on very tightly so that you can put them on not quite so tightly. And then when your bottle spills, you'll know why.
Doesn't go all over the car.
Yeah. I'm famous for not putting these back on as tightly as they need to be. And the other time that I
you ever get the other one open?
Yeah.
How did you do it?
Cliff did it.
Oh, Cliff did it. Oh, wow.
Yeah, he took it in the other room and did something. So when you've got something like, for those who don't know what we're talking about a Starbucks bottle of coffee. And Starbucks, you can now pay me and sponsor a moment. But delicious coffee. I do like it. There's the endorsement. But the bottles that you buy have a metal cap, and they're in glass. And the expansion rates of glass and metal are different. And then if you add to it a little bit of glue from the stickiness of the coffee that comes out into your cap, because you've got coffee slurped on the jar top, and it then gets into the cap, and then the sugar in it bonds it. It's not a very strong bond, and you can break it. But, yeah, so if you've got bottles that have caps, they're often put on with the bottle hot so that they seal a little more tightly when you cool it off, especially if you put it in the fridge. So some of the popping, and then that's why you get the vacuum inside the jar, because of the difference in the temperature at which it was heated and cooked and sealed, and then it stays sucked in. The energy comes down as you chill it. The pressure rather reduces as you chill the glass. So when you pop it, the little bubble thing goes up. Starbucks doesn't have that, of course, but it has a little bit of it, actually. There's a little bit of a depression there that can adjust for the pressure of the temperature. But it's just the stiffness of the bottle cap. And it's not the pressure of the carbonation that makes a bottle of soda pop / Coke or whatever you call that fizzy stuff hard to open. It's the tightness of the cap. And once you break it, it's never that tight again unless you change temperatures on it. Like if you have it on your table and you close it and then you put it in the fridge, it will change and it'll be harder to open again because of the difference in the plastic and the two plastics.
Or you put it in the freezer and you forget about it.
Oh, there is that one.
Ooh.
And that can get really wicked because
That's
water is
You
one of the
think?
few substances that actually expands as it gets close to freezing. At 4 degrees Celsius, which is not very warm, it's right above freezing, water is at its biggest. And that's because water molecules are weird. They really are. 2 hydrogen and an oxygen forms kind of like a boomerang thing, and they don't sit well together. And as they get toward the matrix of forming the ice, they'll come in together tighter when they crystallize into ice. But right before that, they're kind of like elbowing each other, trying to get into the matrix that the temperature is requiring them to go into. And so that's when they pop the bottles and the cans, and then when you bring it back out, you discover that it didn't quite fit so well. And learned that one once in, I think we were in Pennsylvania, I want to say. I think it was Pennsylvania. We had a couple of, my mother did a food concession for a while at a flea market. Crazy. My mother did some interesting things in life. And I was being lazy, and I didn't want to carry in the 6 or 7 cartons of assorted beverages, carbonated things, from the back of the car. And of course that night it did get cold enough, and then the next morning we fizzed.
Oh.
That was a mess, I will tell you. That was a mess.
Bet it was. Oh, brother.
Yeah. So you learn a lot of things. One of the things I learned was to not let cans freeze. It's just not a good idea. And yeah, people do forget things. So the plastics are a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
So you can freeze the water and probably not leak. Probably is the operative word. So those are pseudosciences. It's people are trying to explain things without a clear understanding of the science behind them. And yeah, you can shake a bottle of Coke and do interesting things when you open it and fizz the world, or you can really get dumb and put some Mentos in it so that it fizzes as you get a reaction with the carbonic acid. It's carbonic acid that's in the Coke, yeah. Oh yeah, lots of people have. The ones that amaze me are the ones that, to make a YouTube video will drink the Coke and then swallow and let it do that craziness in their stomach, and then it comes out every orifice they have. Yeah. Places where carbonated beverages were not intended to be. Who knows what that's going to do long term for them.
Frat parties at the U of A.
Yeah, well. Yeah. No comment. No comment. Frats and sororities can be interesting places from time to time.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah, beginning students are interesting. So, we live in a world where people try to explain things, but they don't really go to school. Interestingly, that's why I went and got the engineering degree, was that I had an innate sense that some of the stuff in my flying textbook that I was using didn't make logical sense. And I didn't understand lift and some of the fluid mechanics really well enough to know why they did. There was just this feeling in me that I didn't think they were quite catching the right story. I think they were trying to simplify it to explain it to non-scientific pilots, because most pilots are not all that scientific and don't really understand the lift of their airplanes and their aircraft. And I was the big thing I was trying to work on was this one student who asked me, why does wake turbulence sink? Because wake turbulence sinks about 1,000 foot a second. And so if you're behind a big airplane, you can get bumpy real quick. You want to be above their wake.
If you're in a small plane, forget about it.
Oh, you can get spun.
Or as we ran into a couple times in Los Angeles in news helicopters.
Yeah.
It
disrupts the lift.
By LAX.
Yeah, it disrupts the lift on the lift surfaces and does all kinds of things to you. So understanding how that works and why it works was part of what sent me back to school at the University of Akron. And when I took all the courses that I was interested in learning, my advisor looked at me and said, you're exactly 2 credits away from a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. You might as well get it. And so I did. And that's how I ended up with the engineering degree from a different U of A, the University of Akron.
There you go.
In Akron, Ohio.
Uh-huh.
So that was many, many, many moon ago.
Home of Goodyear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And dirigibles and other
Now, did
other
that
light
help
aircraft.
you at Goodyear when
Having
you
the
walked
engineering
in
degree?
with the engineering degree?
Well, yeah, that's how I got a job at Goodyear.
Okay, well, it worked.
Yeah. So the progression of that, here's a little bit of Shafir trivia, was that I was a flight instructor and my husband worked at Goodyear. And that worked fine for our relationship. It didn't work so well for our schedule because flight instructors tend to work holidays, evenings,
You bet.
weekends, the times when all the people working the desk jobs are off. And of course, my husband worked a desk job, so the times that we would have had as a couple, they worked when I was his teacher. They didn't work so well after we were married. He used to spend long hours reading. Thank God he loves to read. He'd read a book and watch me coming and going from the airport because he could watch the airplanes. And after a long bit of discussion and basically coming toward the end of the engineering degree, I don't recall that it took me that long, probably 2 years. And, we had one of those family talks where I'm going to hang up the wings. I'm going to get a desk job so that I work the same hours as you do. And, of course, then Goodyear put me on the night shift.
Naturally.
Working tech
yeah,
service
yeah.
in the factory.
Naturally, sure.
But we still at least had weekends and holidays, and he slept when I was awake, and et cetera.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we made that work, but it was,
Carol and I did that for years.
Yeah,
and
lots
it
of
was-
families face that.
Oh, yeah.
It was still better than we wouldn't have had time together with the flight instructing. And so that's when I hung up my flight instructor wings and stopped doing that. So, yeah.
But technically, you could still get in an airplane and fly.
If I got a physical, I'd have to get a physical, and I'd have to have a biennial.
Okay, what do
What's
you
a
mean?
biennial? A biennial is every 2 years you have to fly with an instructor and get recertified.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does. Because, first of all, the regulations have changed dramatically. The last time I flew, there were not anywhere near as many drones to deal with.
Oh, I never thought of that.
There wasn't anywhere near the navigation equipment that there is today. So there have been a lot of changes since I stopped flying. And no, I would not be safe to just get into an airplane and fly. Now, if I was a passenger in a light airplane and there was an emergency, would I be, yes, I would grab the stick and do whatever needed to be done. And I would trust that I would mostly function. And I'd be cautious because mostly is the operative word.
Yeah.
But outside of that, no, I'm perfectly content, and I don't take any of my licenses with me when I fly as a passenger because I'm not going to have the instructor ID when I'm a passenger in the back seat, and I'm
Sure.
not going to do a back seat instruction either because that's just not cool.
No, you're right.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So lots of things to ponder, and yes, it's been a crazy, wild life, and that's how I became an engineer at Goodyear.
That's very cool,
Yeah.
though. Wow.
It was one of the positions that I was offered. That was another time when the economy was tight, and it was very hard for white guys to get jobs coming out of engineering schools.
But a woman engineer.
But a woman engineer did not have anywhere near as much challenge because companies were struggling to achieve diversity.
You bet.
And and I did take the job, one of the jobs that was offered me, and I hope that other people got the other jobs, because there have always been situations that make it hard for some people who thought it would be easy to get a job when they got done with college. And when the economy gets tight, engineering's because R&D gets shut down. It's viewed as a luxury, when in reality it really isn't for a company. A company that fails to innovate will start to fall back.
Well, it doesn't seem like it would be a luxury in this day and age, though.
Well, I hope that companies get it, that it's not anywhere near luxury. You don't have as much time to get new products to market,
Right.
and to keep renovating and innovating on your current product line. And that's what R&D does. R&D continues to work on what's out there. R&D stands for research and development, and so you're constantly making your product better, hopefully, not just cheaper. Although certainly cost is part of what you're looking at. And
It's a reality.
it's a reality. There's nothing, and profit's not a dirty word. It's a necessary word. Companies have to function. So they need profits. It's just when the profits get extreme that people start having a reason to be unhappy. Yeah.
And it's amazing, especially with your younger students, how they will perceive the future really differently.
Oh, they very, very definitely will. They will have different problems. They'll have different challenges and different solutions. And I wish them all well. I try to give them the tools that I can to help think about things with more science, with more logic, and just make sense of this crazy world. You can do that. We can be kinder and gentler to each other than what we are, and we can share better.
And congrats to our athletics department at IRSC.
Absolutely.
17 all A students.
Very good.
And the rest of the department, all the rest of the athletes, which has got to be, 300 or so?
Yeah.
All 3.5 or better.
Perfect. That's great.
That's
That's wonderful.
amazing.
So
That is amazing.
one last item. I will do a plug for our plant sale this Sunday and Monday at the temple.
All
and
right.
that is 1 to 5 Sunday and Monday at 540 Northwest University Boulevard, Suite 102. And that's in Port St. Lucie. A plant sale Sunday and Monday. You'll find we've got blooming Christmas cactus, and we've got some other blooming flowers, some rare things, some ground orchids, and lots of interesting plants. Got a ZZ plant, I believe.
A who?
A ZZ plant. Come and find out.
I'm thinking ZZ Top here.
There you go. All right, folks.
Have a good
Have a
week.
great time, and see you next Friday, God willing. Or talk to you anyway.
And see you at the plant sale.
See you at the plant sale. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb, and this has been Ask a Rabbi.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.